This is Hugh, also known as Horse, and this is my 21 Park Chronicles.
Well, I took what I learned. The ingenuity, the class, the charisma, the steps, the movement, the hesitation, the wait, to be curious, very curious, to create an atmosphere.
I burn hot like lava, shoot hot in the...
Yeah, this is it, man. 661 East 224th. So this is where we spent most of my uptown years here. Not the first place I lived in the Bronx, but the longest place we lived in the Bronx. You know, traveled a long way from Jamaica to the Bronx, like many of the inhabitants of uptown. And you know, when we first came to this neighborhood, this was a predominantly Italian neighborhood, actually. Ended up going to St. Mary's down the block there, which I think is now a charter school, I believe. And yeah, man, a lot of fond memories here, man. My parents bought this house in 1979. We came to the country in 1974 from Jamaica. And actually, my father was he had a teaching contract in the Bahamas, so we came from the Bahamas here before that. And now this building, this was our yard. This was my backyard, man, right here, which is now a building, which is you see that a lot in the Bronx. But this is kind of where it all began for me. 224th Street, you know? And, you know, we eventually moved around. We're gonna go to the first place I lived when we first came to the country is actually right across the street from 21 Park, East 225th. And, you know, in that time, you know, the park, you know, was a little notorious in the 70s, man, you know, and having strict Jamaican parents, they were like, yo, the park is off limits for you. But of course, being a young Jamaican boy, I didn't listen. And I was fascinated by this sport called basketball. You know, and I had no idea how to play it, didn't know what I was doing. But I had an interesting like history with that park, because my father, when we first came to the country, 21 Park, at least the area where the grass was and stuff, that's where all the Jamaicans used to play soccer, right? That's where everybody played soccer. So I used to go with him. So that was my first exposure to 21 Park. And so I really played soccer when I first came. But then I saw, you know, I saw everybody playing basketball, and I said, I like that better, you know? So that was interesting, you know, that exposure to 21 Park. So 21 Park wasn't always about ball. You know, it was about soccer. And actually, at that time, eventually, all those soccer players in 21 Park, they formed this soccer league that my father actually was pioneered in helping that. And I know on Gun Hill Road, where Evander Childs High School is, you know, they have those games on the Saturdays. I don't know if they still have that league, but I think they do. But my father's one of the originators of that soccer league. It used to be called the Bronx American Soccer League or Jamaican International Soccer League. So that was my first exposure to 21 Park. And then I fell in love with basketball. So 3941 White Plains Road, this is the second place I lived uptown. We lived in a one-bedroom house, a one-bedroom apartment here, 3941 White Plains Road. And it had burnt down, and I know they just rebuilt it not too long ago, but this was the second place we lived when we first came to the country, from like, I'll say maybe 76 to, no, like 73 to like 75 or something like that. But 3941, and then we went to 225th. A lot of memories. So across the street there with that check cashing place, that was a number spot. And that's where that was like the only place that had Space Invaders and the pinball machines. And that's where we used to hang out. But now I realize, when I'm young, I didn't realize. I realize it now. That was a number spot, man. Crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. But I never bought numbers though. Oh man. I remember my man Eddie's mom used to work in there. Shout out to my man Eddie Tully. May she rest in peace. He had a very nice mom, man, and she used to work in there. I remember that too. Yeah. And then of course, how can you forget the patty shop? Oh my goodness. I tell you, boy. 2 patty spots. Champion Bakery, of course. Everybody loves their patties and their bread. Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story. I was one of their I was their first customer. I'm gonna tell you a story. I remember when they weren't open yet, and they just had they had everything covered. But I saw people in there, and I remember knocking on the glass. I must have been like 7, 8. I'm knocking on the glass because I wanted a patty. And then when the woman said, "We're not open," so I just stood there and I knocked on the glass again. And she mouthed, "We're not open." So I stood, I knocked on the glass again, and then she came in. She opened the door and told me to come in, and I was taking guitar lessons at the time. I had my guitar, crazy. I had my guitar, and she opened and let me come in. She said, "Son, we're not open." And I said, "But I have $1 for a patty." And she said, she went to the back, bought me a patty. She took my $1. She said, "You know, you're our first customer." I said, "Do I get free patties?" And she laughed and said, "No." It's a true story. True story. Champion Bakery. But then we got 226. Now, that's the world famous patty shop now because of Instagram, right? Kingston Tropical Bakery. Let me tell you a story about that patty shop now. That's my favorite patty shop. But when I say all of my cousins worked in that patty shop at one point in their life, all of my cousins worked there. So I remember when I used to go in there, they work at the counter, someone at the back, but there's always one of my cousins always worked at the counter. So whenever I go in there, man, and I say, "I'll order, yeah, can I have 1 patty?" My cousin would just get the bag, put in the patty, look around, put in like 3, 4, but give me like 4 patties for like 50 cents. Yo, so my cousins worked at Kingston Tropical Bakery for like 10 years, man. All in their teenage years up until their early 20s, and they all, of course, moved on to be very successful. But I have a lot of memories in this bakery too. Yeah, and this is Instagram famous now. Best patty and cocoa bread in New York, Kingston Tropical Bakery. The best of the best. So this is the first house that we lived in when we came to America, man. 728 East 225th, right across the street from 21 Park. So this is my first exposure to the park. I used to come here, used to play. When we immigrated here, we stayed at our cousins, like on the first floor. And just found memories on this block, man. Growing up at from White Plains Road to 224th, 223rd, 225th, but 21 Park was always the center for me. That was always my park, different people have, they have different affinities for different areas of their park. Like, a lot of dudes uptown, Olinville was their park. They have Olinville Day, they have Valley Day, that was their park. I'll be honest with you, I never felt like those weren't my parks, we played there because, we used to go around and play everywhere. But my park was 21 Park, man. So, shout out to the Valley Day and Olinville Day, respect. But, my kinship is with 21 Park. So let's go take a look. Yeah, so this side used to be the half courts. That's when if you're really young, you're not ready for the full court. This is where the young kids used to come and do half court. We graduated straight to the full court because we were nice like that. But now, man, look at it now. We got the handball on this side. And from what I hear now, like I said, things don't stay the same. They change and they progress. This is now like the volleyball court for the Latin community, the Latin American community and Mexican community, which is becoming more and more prominent in the Northeast Bronx. Like I said, neighborhoods change, and change is good, So now this is like a volleyball court now, and I think from what I hear, they rock a volleyball with the soccer ball. So they're doing it any way they can. But that's just another example of, how things don't stay the same, and things change and things progress. And change is good, change is good. But that's incredible. 21 Park, man. This is the field. Well, now it's a field. This used to be all concrete. And this is where all the Jamaican men used to come and play soccer, like on a weekend. From like Friday to Sunday, they come in the mornings and the afternoons, and they would play, set up their cones for their goal, the goal. And this is where my pops used to bring me, because they used to play, every weekend, And, then, as I got a little older, even when I was younger, I started sneaking off while he was here, going to the ball, to the ball courts. Had no idea how to play, but, dribbling and learning here and there. And then, like eventually kind of moving away from soccer, then concentrating on basketball. And of course, I was not very good in the beginning at all, But, you hone your skills on these courts and, you get better. But when you look back on it, more importantly, you develop relationships, right? You develop friendships, lifelong relationships. And, you realize, the influence that this park had on your life because of the camaraderie and the friendships and the memories, that were created on these courts. First time I ever dunked a ball was at 21 Park, and after I got that first dunk, that's the only thing I wanted to do. That was my claim to fame. If you're gonna get in the lane, horse is gonna dunk on you, Wasn't highly skilled, but I was strong and I could dunk. And I learned all that here, and of course refined my skills. Was fortunate enough to go to Talentine, St. Nicholas of Talentine, powerhouse basketball program in the Bronx back in the day. And you cannot help but get good playing against, Malik Sealy, Keith McMillan, the sharpshooter, Adrian Autry, Brian Reese, John Johnson. I mean, these guys are top level, some of them professionals, man. And you play with them every day, you're gonna get better, So that's what I learned, and that's how I got better playing ball. But that being said, it all started here. It's a shame that maybe, the courts aren't here anymore, which is, a little disappointing, but, things change, without change, there's no progress, so that's how I look at it. Neighborhoods change, situations change, people change, and things don't always stay the same. So now it's, a track, it's definitely more playful for kids, and I hope they enjoy it a little bit more. But, I think we were very fortunate that we had the courts here, especially, the young guys, when we were, the two courts here, the young guys, we played to the left, on the left-hand side, because all the grown dudes played on the half moons, And even after we got older and actually probably good enough to beat the older dudes, we still played on our court. We still stayed on the left, and we were definitely ready. By the time we was, 18, 19, they couldn't mess with us. Shout out to them, respect, dude, but we were better than y'all. But man, a lot of memories here, a lot of fond memories. Cherish the relationships, the moments. Opportunity to kind of walk down memory lane in this park, and an opportunity to come back uptown to see the old neighborhood, and it feels good. And yeah, man, that's my 21 Chronicle, and I enjoyed it. It's been good.